or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org. Your Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service now presents a reading of articles and features from the Buffalo News for Thursday, March 26th. Your readers today are
Pat Lamont
and Ruth Nowotniak, and we'll go to our weather forecast. Cloudy today with periods of rain and a thunderstorm in the afternoon, high of 56. Colder, some rain and a thunderstorm early, then rain and drizzle tonight, low of 30. Partly sunny tomorrow, high of 35. Saturday, clouds and sun with a snow shower, high of 34. And Sunday looks like it's cloudy but a tad warmer with a high of 46. Nationally, our high was in Hill City, Kansas at 94. Boy, you don't hear Kansas very often for a high. And the low was at Frenchville, Maine at 14 degrees. Our Skywatch, our sunrise was at 7:08 this morning, and it is to set at 7:35 this evening. And we won't go into snow derbies because we are beyond that right now. We're not going to do that. So now we'll go on to our front page news. Instagram, YouTube found liable in addiction suit. This article is from Los Angeles. After a grueling 7 weeks of court proceedings, excuse me, and more than 40 hours of tense deliberations across 9 days, jurors handed down a landmark decision in Los Angeles Superior Court on Wednesday, finding Instagram and YouTube responsible for the suffering of a Chico woman who charged the platform was built to addict young users like her in one of the country's most closely watched civil trials. Kaylee G.M., the 20-year-old plaintiff, arrived in court just before 10 a.m., wearing the same rose-colored maxi dress she donned to testify in February. She remained stoic as the verdict, the $3 million damages award, and the finding for punitive damages were read out. A companion next to her fought back tears, her chin quivering. Several observers wept silently despite Judge Carolyn Kuhl's repeated warning not to respond. We need to have no reaction to the jury's verdict, no crying out, no reactions, no disturbance, Cole warned. And if there is, we will have to have you removed from the courtroom, and we sure don't want to have to do that. Attorneys for Snapchat and TikTok also appeared in court Wednesday morning to hear the decision. The two platforms settled with Kaylee out of court for undisclosed sums before the trial. The verdict arrived less than 24 hours after a New Mexico jury found Meta liable for $375 million in damages related to Attorney General Raul Torres' claim it turned Instagram into a breeding ground for child predators, a decision the platform has vowed to appeal. The Los Angeles jury took much longer to deliberate. On Friday, jurors preempted their pizza lunch break to ask Cole whether all of them should weigh in on damages or only those who'd agreed on liability. On Monday, they told Cole they were struggling to agree about one of the defendants. Cole told the jury to keep trying. Kaylee said she first got hooked on YouTube and Instagram in grade school. Jurors were charged with determining whether the companies acted negligently in designing their products and failed to warn her of the dangers. Their verdict will echo through of thousands of other pending lawsuits, reshaping the legal landscape for some of the world's most powerful companies. Experts say the payout will likely set the bar for future awards. It comes on the heels of a Delaware court decision clearing Meta's insurers of responsibility for damages incurred from several thousand lawsuits regarding the harm of its platforms allegedly caused children, a ruling that could leave it and other tech titans on the hook for untold future millions. Until this trial, which began in late January, no suit seeking to hold tech titans responsible for harms to children had ever reached a jury. Many more are now set to follow. Kaylee's test case was chosen from among scores of suits currently consolidated in California State Court. Hundreds more are moving together through the federal system, where the first trial is set for June in San Francisco. Collectively, the suits seek to prove that harm flowed not from user content, but from the design and operation of the platforms themselves. That's a critical legal distinction, experts say. Social media companies have so far been protected by a powerful 1996 law called Section 230, which has shielded the apps from responsibility for what happens to children who use it. Lawyers for Meta and Google argued Kaylee's struggles were the result of her fractious home life and fallout from the COVID pandemic, not social media. I don't think it should ever have gotten to a jury trial, said Erwin Chemerinsky, dean of the UC Berkeley School of Law and an expert on the First Amendment, which also protects the platforms. All media tries to keep people on their platform and coming back. Others say social media's algorithmic ability to capture, cultivate, and control attention makes it fundamentally different from teen-friendly romantasy novels, Marvel movies, or first-person shooter games. As deliberations that began March 13th wore on, jurors signaled similar skepticism, asking to see internal Meta documents and reviewing testimony from a defense expert in regards to her professional integrity, being the only doctor stating social media was not a contributing factor to KGM's mental health. They appeared to agree on Meta's culpability by Friday, but labored through Tuesday to hash out a decision for Google, delivering their verdict just after 10 a.m. on Wednesday. Their decision will likely transform the already heated debate over social media addiction as a concept, what role apps may play in engineering it, and whether individuals like Kaylee can prove they're afflicted. The platform's attorneys sought to cast doubt on the ailment, emphasizing that there is no formal diagnosis for social media addiction, while also arguing that Kaylee had never been treated for it. Substitute the words YouTube for the word methamphetamine, attorney Louis Lee urged the jury during closing arguments Thursday. Ask yourselves, with your lifetime of experience, whether anybody suffering from addiction could say, yeah, I just kind of lost interest. She was sitting there for hours without being on her phone, said Meta attorney Paul Schmidt. YouTube's team also sought to distance the video sharing app from Instagram and other social media platforms, saying its functions are fundamentally different. Kaylee's team called it a gateway to her social media addiction. YouTube wasn't a gateway to anything, Lee said. YouTube was a toy that a child liked and then put down. Jurors disagreed, ultimately holding the platform liable, though they split the liability 70-30, weighting heavily to Meta. Lanier leaned on his down-home Texas folksiness throughout the trial, telling the jury what was on his heart and scribbling with grease pencil on his demonstrative aids. In his direct addresses to the jury, he used a set of wooden baby blocks, stacks of paper, even a hammer and a crate of eggs. Conversely, the tech teams relied on slick digital presentations to review evidence and illustrate their arguments. Focus on those facts that are at issue with this case, Schmidt urged the jury, not lawyer arguments, not props like a glass of water or a jar of M&Ms, but actual proof and evidence. The case was the first to get Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg on the witness stand, where he defended Instagram's safety record and lamented the difficulty in keeping youngsters off the app. It also made public tens of thousands of pages of internal documents. Documents Lanier argued showed the companies intentionally targeted children and engineered their products to keep them on the platforms longer. These are internal documents that you're uniquely seeing because you're the jury that got to sit on this case, Lanier told the jury during closing arguments on Thursday. It's given you exposure that the world hasn't had.
Iran rejects ceasefire plan, issues its own demands. Iran on Wednesday dismissed an American plan to pause the war in the Middle East and launched more attacks on Israel and Gulf Arab countries, including an assault that sparked a huge fire in Kuwait International Airport. Iran's defiance came as Israel launched airstrikes on Tehran and as the United States deployed paratroopers and more Marines to the region. Iranian state television's English language broadcaster quoted an anonymous official as saying Iran rejected America's ceasefire proposal and has its own demands for an end to the fighting. Iran will end the war when it decides to do so and when its own conditions are met. The hardliner-controlled Press TV quoted the official as saying. Earlier, two officials from Pakistan, which transmitted the U.S. plan to Iran, described the 15-point proposal broadly, saying it addressed sanctions relief, a rollback of Iran's nuclear program, limits on missiles, and reopening the Strait of Hormuz, through which a fifth of the world's oil is shipped. An Egyptian official involved in the mediation effort said the proposal also includes restrictions on Iran's support for armed groups. The official spoke on condition of anonymity to discuss details not yet released. Some of those points were non-starters in negotiations before the war. Iran has insisted it won't discuss its ballistic missile program or its support of regional militias, which it views as key to its security. And its ability to control passage through the Strait of Hormuz represents one of the biggest strategic advantages. Iran's attacks on regional energy infrastructure, along with its restrictions on the strait, have sent oil prices skyrocketing, putting pressure on the U.S. to find a way to end the chokehold and calm the markets. At least 1,000 troops from the 82nd Airborne Division will be sent to the Mideast in the coming days, 3 people with knowledge of the plans told the Associated Press. They spoke on condition of anonymity to discuss sensitive military plans. The paratroopers are trained to jump into hostile or contested areas to secure key territory and airfields. The Pentagon is also in the process of sending about 5,000 more Marines trained in amphibious assaults and thousands of sailors to the region. Mediators are pushing for possible in-person talks between the Iranians and the Americans, perhaps as soon as Friday in Pakistan, the Egyptian and Pakistani official said. Trump has said the U.S. is in negotiations right now and that the participants included Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, his son-in-law Jared Kushner, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and Vice President Vance. He has not disclosed who from Iran they are in contact with, but said the other side, I can tell you they'd like to make a deal. Press TV cited an Iranian 5-point plan for a ceasefire coming from the official who rejected the U.S. proposal. That plan included a halt to killings of its officials, means to make no other war is waged against it, reparations for the war, the end of hostilities, and Iran's exercise of sovereignty over the Strait of Hormuz. Those measures, particularly reparations and a continued chokehold over the Strait of Hormuz, likely will be unacceptable to the White House. While Iran and Oman both have territory in the strait, its narrow shipping canals are viewed as international waterways through which all ships can travel. Israeli officials who have been advocating for Trump to continue the war against Iran were surprised by the submission of a U.S. ceasefire plan, according to a person who was briefed on the contours of the proposal and spoke on the condition of anonymity because they were not authorized to speak publicly. Any talks between the U.S. and Iran would face monumental challenges. It's not clear who in Iran's government has the authority to negotiate or would be willing to, as Israel has vowed to continue killing the country's leaders. Iran remains highly suspicious of the United States, which twice under the Trump administration has attacked during high-level diplomatic talks, including with the February 28 strikes that started the current war. The Israeli military said Wednesday afternoon it had completed several waves of airstrikes in Tehran. The army also said that as part of its strikes a day earlier, it targeted an Iranian submarine development center in Isfahan. There have been some days when the bombings are so intense you can't do anything, a 26-year-old graduate student in Tehran said, adding his friends mostly stayed home. He spoke on the condition of anonymity because of security scares. Missile alert sirens sounded simple multiple times in Israel as Iran and the Lebanon-based militant group Hezbollah launched attacks. Iran-backed Hezbollah has fired rockets into northern Israel around the clock since the war began, disrupting the lives of hundreds of thousands of people.
You're listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier Radio reading service. The time is approximately 15 minutes past the hour. And we will now go on to our editorial. Damages. Buffalo taxpayers are once again paying the price for questionable police conduct, and city leaders are not doing enough to stop it. A prime example is the city's payout of $700,000 to Bruce McNeil. McNeil filed a federal lawsuit in 2020 accusing officers John Davidson, now the president of the Buffalo Police Benevolent Association, and Detective Patrick Carey, an officer at the time, of falsely accusing him of possessing crack cocaine. McNeil's payout is among more than $1.7 million in settlements of lawsuits filed against the city, negotiated by the Corporation Counsel's office. The Buffalo Common Council is being asked to consider those settlements. As the News' Justin Sondel reported, approval comes at some cost. The city will have less than $500,000 left to cover liability costs. That figure does not include the upcoming $3 million payment to the estate of William Sager, Jr., the Air National Guardsman who died because of injuries from an altercation with an off-duty Buffalo police officers working security at the now-shuttered Molly's Pub in 2014. University Council member Rashid Wyatt, who has long advocated for police leadership to spend more effort educating officers on safe policing, has the right idea. Proactive training would help ensure residents are not needlessly harmed during their interactions with law enforcement officers. It could also decrease the amount of money the city pays out in liability due to police conduct. The News, the Investigative Post, and other local media outlets reported on McNeil's story. On Memorial Day in 2019, McNeil was stopped while driving down Broadway by Officer John Davidson, who is now the president of the Buffalo Police Benevolent Association, and his partner, Officer Patrick Carey. What followed raises serious concerns. McNeil claimed that the officers gave no reason for the stop. He was arrested anyway and placed in the back seat of the patrol car while they searched his vehicle. They eventually let him go. McNeil later reported damage to his vehicle and attempted to file a complaint at the precinct. But that decision, he claimed, led to a far more serious accusation by the police. Davidson and Gary then claimed they found crack cocaine in the back seat of their police car. The sudden discovery by police of cocaine, they said, occurred after they released McNeil, according to the federal civil rights lawsuit against the city. The charges against McNeil were dismissed in court, and Davidson was suspended for 7 days without pay. Those lost wages pale in comparison to the $700,000 boost cost borne by taxpayers. The incident, along with others, did little to harm either officer's career prospects. It raises troubling questions. Why do officers with prior lawsuits remain in leadership positions? And why do officers with histories of lawsuits continue to rise in the ranks? Wyatt's call for training is spot on, but training is not enough. Without real accountability, Buffalo residents will continue to pay in tax dollars and in eroded trusts.
And from another voice. New York needs a smarter path on tobacco policy. And this is written by Dr. Jeffrey Willett, who currently serves as director of the Project to End Smoking for the Progressive Policy Institute. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration recently released results from the National Youth Tobacco Survey showing that youth tobacco use is down across the board. Remarkably, the rate of monthly tobacco and nicotine use among teens has been cut by 2/3 in the past 6 years. Even youth use of nicotine pouches, which several advocacy groups frame as the latest nicotine delivery villain, has remained very low. In fact, the Albany Times-Union last week reported that the U.S. Food and Drug Administration released data that show about 1.6% of middle and high school students reported using nicotine pouches monthly last year, down slightly from 1.8% the year before. New York Governor Kathy Hochul should take note. Her proposed budget includes a 75% excise tax on nicotine pouches that she says is meant to help reduce youth use. However, there is little evidence that a 75% tax on a legal regulated product would meaningfully reduce youth uptake of a product they are not already using at high rates. Excessive tobacco taxes have a well-documented history of fueling illicit trade, pushing products out of regulated retail settings and into unregulated channels. New York knows this well. Unlicensed sellers and illicit products cost the state more than $2 billion per year. What's more, a 75% tax on nicotine pouches would eliminate much of the financial incentive that encourages adult smokers to switch to less harmful alternatives. When the price gap between cigarettes and lower-risk nicotine products narrows, or when non-combustible products become more expensive, smokers lose the economic motivation to make the switch. As someone who has spent more than 2 decades working in tobacco prevention, control, and smoking cessation, I have seen both the strengths and limitations of traditional cessation strategies. The hard truth is that abstinence-focused cessation strategies are simply insufficient to meet the needs of many New Yorkers who want to quit smoking. Policies that rely on excessive taxation do not advance public health. They risk keeping more smokers tied to the products that cause the greatest harm. The current regulatory framework is working. Now is not the time to undermine it. And our editorial cartoon is one frame from Adam Zyglis of the Buffalo News. And it is an elephant with a hat on and standing next to Uncle Sam. And the elephant on his is holding a note in his hand that says Oil Futures, and on his hat he has America First, referring naturally to President Trump. And Uncle Sam is looking, they're both looking at a poster board, and Uncle Sam has a absolutely shocking look on his face and with a pointing finger, and he sees the elephant raise its hand and says, "I see no signature markings of insider trading," and in front of them is a graphic board that has the tremendous spike in oil since the beginning of the Iranian war, and now dropping, but it was radically up and down, and probably will continue that way. And our first opinion, please, comes from Emmanuel Afolabi of Progressive Perspectives. Invisible cloud of digital activity has hidden cost. Every time we stream a movie, upload photos, send emails, or ask artificial intelligence to answer a question, the action feels effortless. The internet appears weightless, floating somewhere in an invisible cloud. But the cloud is not weightless at all. Behind every digital activity lies a vast physical infrastructure of data centers, servers, cables, and energy networks that run nonstop. These facilities power the modern internet, and they consume enormous amounts of electricity. According to the International Energy Agency, data centers and data transmission networks already account for roughly 2 to 3% of global electricity use. To keep servers from overheating, massive cooling systems operate around the clock, circulating chilled air or water through buildings packed with protection processors. Much of that electricity still comes from fossil fuels. This means our seemingly harmless digital habits contribute to the carbon emissions driving climate change. The irony is striking. Many people think of the digital economy as environmentally friendly because it replaces physical products with online alternatives. But convenience does not erase environmental cost. It simply shifts it somewhere else. Training large AI models requires enormous computational power, often running thousands of specialized processors for weeks or even months. Each step in that process consumes electricity, which can translate into significant carbon emissions. Researchers have warned that the carbon footprint of advanced AI systems can be substantial depending on the energy sources used. None of this means digital technology is inherently harmful. In fact, technology can play a critical role in solving environmental problems. The real issue is how the digital economy is powered. Firms such as Google have pledged to match their electricity consumption with renewable energy resource purchases, while other companies are investing in wind farms, solar energy, and more efficient data centers. Advances in cooling systems, energy-efficient chips, and smarter server management can significantly reduce the electricity required to run large computing facilities. Governments must require greater transparency from data center operators about their energy consumption and carbon emissions. Public reporting would help researchers, policymakers, and citizens understand the true environmental cost of digital servers. Clear data could also encourage competition among companies to build more energy efficient systems. Expanding wind, solar, and other low carbon energy sources will help ensure that the growth of the digital economy does not come at the planet's expense. While individual actions cannot solve the problems alone, small choices such as reducing unnecessary cloud storage, limiting ultra-high definition streaming when it is not needed, or keeping devices longer instead of replacing them frequently can collectively reduce energy demand. Most importantly, we need to start talking about the environmental footprint of the digital world. Technology has the potential to help build a more sustainable future, but that will only happen if we acknowledge the hidden costs of our digital lives and push for smarter, cleaner systems to power the internet we increasingly depend on.
You are listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier Radio reading service. The time is approximately 28 minutes past the hour, and we will go on to our second opinion piece. This is by George Skelto from Los Angeles Times. Attacks on Newsom's dyslexia illustrate Trump's ineptitude. President Trump claims Governor Gavin Newsom is unfit to be president because he has a, quote, learning disability. It's a classic case of the pot calling the kettle black. The century-old pot-kettle idiom points out hypocrisy, as when one person accuses another of a flaw that inflicts himself. California's governor has battled dyslexia all his life. Dyslexia is a learning disability that makes reading and writing difficult, but it doesn't mean a stricken person is unable to learn. He just needs to learn differently, as Newsom has done since he was a teen. Trump apparently isn't dyslexic, but he clearly has some learning disabilities, including stubbornness, narrow-mindedness, and intolerance. The president still hasn't learned, for example, that he lost the 2020 election. He persists in the belief that the election was stolen in a Joe Biden conspiracy. That's a bizarre fantasy. He also didn't learn from past administrations that a commander-in-chief should not wage war against Iran without a concrete plan to keep open the Straits of Hormuz so Middle Eastern oil can keep flowing to the world. And he never has learned what most of us were taught by our parents, that you don't berate your friends if you expect to keep them friendly, lashing out, for instance, at allies before and after they're balking at sending warships to help protect the vital strait. Moreover, he didn't learn that the nation's founders embedded a checks and balances governing system in the Constitution and that Congress has a role in imposing tariffs. When the normally Trump-friendly Supreme Court ruled against his unilateral tariff agenda, the spoiled president did what he usually does: attack, insulting the justices who struck down his edicts. Fools, lapdogs, and a disgrace to our nation, he whined. It's an embarrassment to their families. Trump still hasn't learned to shut up and try to be civilized. Not even after shocking everyone by saying of the late Republican Senator John McCain, a Navy pilot who spent more than 5 years as a tortured POW in Hanoi Hilton, quote, "He's a war hero because he was captured. I like people that weren't captured." Any respect I might have had for the guy vanished in 2015 when the then candidate for president publicly mocked a New York Times reporter's disability. At a campaign rally, Trump jerked his arms and flailed his hands while making fun of the reporter's palsy-like ailment. So it wasn't a surprise recently when Trump tore into Newsom for his dyslexia 4 times in 1 week. Yes, Newsom has his eye on the 2028 presidential election and has been scoring points nationally with Democratic activists by using Trump as a punching bag. But Trump keeps offering himself up as an irresistible target. Regardless, there's no excuse for attacking someone because of his disability. Gavin Newsom, Trump's synonym for the governor, has admitted he has learning disabilities, dyslexia, he told reporters in the Oval Office. "Honestly, I'm all for people with learning disabilities, but not for my president. Everything about him is dumb," Trump added. In a Fox News radio interview, Trump said, quote, "Presidents can't have a learning disability," unquote. And on Facebook, Trump wrote, quote, "I don't want the President of the United States to have a cognitive deficiency," unquote. A quick Google search could have shown Trump that several presidents have had learning disabilities, including dyslexia. Start with George Washington, who struggled with grammar and spelling, and Thomas Jefferson, author of the Declaration of Independence, who had trouble with reading and spelling. Other presidents with learning disabilities: Andrew Jackson, Woodrow Wilson, Dwight Eisenhower, John Kennedy, and Lyndon Johnson. "It's a poor mind that can think of only one way to spell a word," Jackson asserted. Scientist Albert Einstein was dyslexic. So were Apple co-founders Steve Jobs and Thomas Edison. Dyslexia affects roughly 1 in 5 Americans to some degree, more than 40 million people, although relatively few are aware of it, according to researchers. Newsom has spoken openly for years about his struggles with dyslexia. It's difficult for him to read, especially prepared speeches, so he reads and rereads, underlines and highlights, and meticulously takes notes. When a speech must be read off a teleprompter, he practices for hours. In January, the governor began his State of the State address to the legislature with this ad lib: "I'm not shy or, embarrassed about my 960 SAT score, but I am a little bit about my inability to read the written speech text, and it's always been something that I have to work through and I'm confronting. In his recently released autobiography, Young Man in a Hurry, Newsom writes, "My high school grades were all over the place, and I scored lousy on the SAT, 3 hours of dyslexic torture." Early in his political career as a San Francisco supervisor, he writes, quote, "Speaking to a crowd was not unlike the fear I felt in 3rd grade reading to my classmates. So I learned to memorize my talking points and best lines and wing it from there," unquote. This is how I discovered one of the secret powers of dyslexia. I could read a room with the best of them. I'd walk in and immediately size up the faces, mood, and manners. I learned that an audience didn't mind occasional hiccups of speech as long as you looked them in the eye. Newsom was twice elected mayor and twice governor. None of this means he should necessarily be elected president. There may be policy and political reasons to consider him unfit, but not because of any learning disability.
And our final opinion piece comes from Kathleen Parker of the Washington Post. GOP is getting a makeover just in time for midterms. Throughout his second term as president, Donald Trump has enjoyed a bounty of forgiveness from his MAGA constituents and Republicans generally. No bad turn has gone unappreciated until now. Suddenly, the White House and Republicans in Congress seem compelled to change the party's tune to de-emphasize some prized aspirations, such as mass deportation and vaccine pullbacks ahead of the midterm elections. They must have noticed that many voters, not just Democrats, have been turned off by the administration's deportation and health policies, as well as the killings of innocent Americans by out-of-control immigration agents. Even if many Americans support a secure southern border, they're having a hard time swallowing the mass removal of people who are not criminals but law-abiding folks with homes, families, and jobs. They may be here without permission, but this isn't what we mean by criminal, as MAGA knows. Arguing that entering the country illegally ipso facto makes people criminals stretches beyond even what Trump means when he talks about getting rid of the worst of the worst. More than half of the people deported by midsummer 2025 had no criminal conviction, according to a Washington Post analysis. Nearly 60% of Americans say Trump has gone too far with his immigration policies, according to a Washington Post ABC Ipsos poll. And 62% oppose aggressive tactics by immigration and customs enforcement. Though one might wish for higher numbers, these figures show accountability and voting remain important. When asked by the Post last month what range of deportations he supports, Trump said, "I want to see everybody deported, but we're focusing on criminals. We're focusing on killers." By this, one might assume his including the immigration agents who fatally shot 2 civilians in Minneapolis. I wouldn't mind seeing the guys who killed Renee Good and Alex Preddy perp walk into Alligator Alcatraz for some time out with other criminals. Maybe dog-killing cowgirl Kristi Noem, whom Trump recently removed as Homeland Security Secretary, could join them. It's refreshing to hear Republican Senator Tom Tillis of North Carolina speak up against Trump appointee demanding her exit. What matters, of course, isn't Trump's policies or the people who suffered under Noem. It's the midterms, and that means Republicans largely have to reinvent themselves to win. So congressional leaders meeting in Florida for a retreat recently were instructed by party and White House officials to avoid talking about mass deportation and focus instead on removing violent criminals from the U.S. Even Trump has begun walking back his campaign promise of deporting up to 20 million undocumented immigrants, more than are actually here, and instead is calling for protections for undocumented workers in hospitality and agriculture jobs. Could we keep some construction workers too, and house painters, Presumably, agriculture covers the armies of gardeners who keep Palm Beach's manicured edges trimmed. In a related matter, Republicans are also retreating from attacking the COVID-19 mRNA vaccines, fearing that changes to vaccine policy could hurt them in the midterms. Members of a federal vaccine advisory board handpicked by Health and Human Services Secretary Robert Kennedy Jr. had been weighing a plan to no longer recommend the shots because of debunked claims that DNA contaminants in the vaccines were harmful. Rationally speaking, picking a policy or altering a plan for such transparently political reasons should only undermine confidence in HHS and Republicans. The vaccines either are or aren't good for people. Which is it? The answer, of course, is which position is best for Republicans trying to hold their Senate and House majorities. The goal is always to maintain power. On that score, Democrats need only not to screw up. Their messages have already been told by Republicans. The 2 dead Americans in Minneapolis, the 5-year-old boy detained by ICE agents in freezing cold, mass deportations of non-criminals, and now rising gas prices. It is pleasantly ironic that Trump, who has been attacking democratic institutions for years, is having to adjust to the most basic institution, one that he can't get around: voting.
And to our business page, private credit could become a public I'm sorry, let me try that again. Private credit could become a public problem. Investors are increasingly yanking their money from private credit funds that lend directly to businesses on worries that could unfortunately become all of our worries, whether we're trading stocks or just going out about our own lives. So what's the deal with private credit? And should everyone start stashing gold under their mattresses? The short answers. 1. Investors have many concerns, but at the top of the list, if artificial intelligence is really as apocalyptic as all the people who stand to make money from it say, then a lot of companies could end up going out of business and defaulting on loans. 2. Although the situation has echoes of the 2008 financial crisis, you don't need to panic, at least not yet. This week, private credit anxiety got some fresh attention after 2 of the biggest names in the business, Ares Management and Apollo Global Management, blocked investors from withdrawing all the money they wanted from private credit funds, according to the Financial Times and Bloomberg. Limits on withdrawals are fairly standard, as private credit firms facilitating the loans want to prevent a kind of run-on-the-bank panic that would force it to dump assets in a fire sale. This kind of thing has been happening a lot in recent months, most notably at Blue Owl Capital, which has lost 40% of its market value this year and was forced to wind down one of its buzzy retail-focused funds after backers got nervous and started demanding their money back. The reason for all this agita has to do with the very nature of private credit. It's not public. I know that sounds a bit circular, but bear with me. Private credit firms essentially act as banks, but without all the regulations that force actual banks to mitigate risk and make their balance sheets public. When these, quote, shadow banks issue loans, the terms are known only to the parties involved. In sum, investors in private credit often don't know what they're holding. So when macro forces add to the uncertainty, like higher interest rates, inflation, a war in the Mideast choking energy flows, a collective fear of AI disseminating entire sectors of the global economy, for example, people understandably start trying to reduce their risk exposure, and they start trying to get their money back. Private fund managers, of course, say the fears are overblown, and they may be right. Bank of America analysts last week echoed fund managers' defense of their industry, saying that there was, quote, misinformation around public-private credit that was causing the markets to overreact to minor data points.
And this is an online article. Seeking clarity. U.S. tap water is generally safe and high quality, but that doesn't mean every glass tastes the same or that every building's plumbing delivers identical water to the faucet. That uncertainty has fueled a booming market for water filters, from simple pitcher models to multi-thousand-dollar reserve osmosis systems. Yet experts say most American households don't need extensive treatment. The challenge is knowing how to decide whether you need a filter. Under the Safe Drinking Water Act, the Environmental Protection Agency sets health standards for more than 90 contaminants in public water systems, including chemicals and microbes. Utilities treat water with disinfectants like chlorine to kill harmful germs before it reaches homes. Most public utilities meet those standards, and most Americans can safely drink from the tap. Start with your utility's annual Consumer Confidence Report, which details detected contaminants and whether the system meets federal standards. These reports are typically available on a city or utility website. You also can contact your provider directly with questions. For many, those reports may be enough reassurance. Still, some consumers want more certainty, especially in older buildings. Private wells are not regulated under the Safe Drinking Water Act, and monitoring them is the responsibility of the homeowners. Testing kits can cost a couple $100 or more, depending on what contaminants they screen. Here's how testing typically works. You order a kit, collect a water sample following the instructions, and mail it to a certified lab. The lab analyzes it for specific contaminants and provides a report. If testing reveals a serious issue, it is recommended contacting your water utility or state environmental agency for guidance. Officials may recommend temporary alternative water sources or infrastructure upgrades. If there's not a problem serious enough to require those measures, a filter may help. The EPA advises that many household activities like flushing toilets and washing clothes don't require treatment, so cooking and drinking are typical uses to consider when choosing a filter. Most filters carry ratings by the nonprofit organization NSF and American National Standard Institute. Common ratings include 42 for taste or smell concerns, 53 for health effects, and 401 for emerging compounds. Not every filter is good for everything. And even if there's a filter out there that does absolutely everything, maybe you don't need it. Many households use filter for taste or color, which really do impact people's enjoyment or sense of confidence in their drinking water. In those cases, a basic carbon filter, like many common pitcher bottles, can be effective. Activated carbon reduces chlorine and byproducts that form when chlorine reacts with natural organic matter in the water. Those byproducts are expected in treated water, says a senior research analyst at Simple Lab. Even when levels are below federal limits, she said she and her colleagues filter their tap water not because the water is unsafe, but to reduce long-term exposure. Lead is another contaminant that often can be beyond the capabilities of filtration systems, but the EPA notes that people may want to use filters even where alternative water services or pipe replacement aren't recommended.
As part of our newspaper reading, we now present the day's death listings. If you need further information on any of these names, please call us at 716-821-5555. That's 716-821-5555. Kurdzil Sr., Paul. Legoff, Roger William. Mamoser, Alice R. Nee Gregory. Popovich, Gwendolyn. Sikora, Thomas J. Werner, Elaine, nee Trillis. And nationally, Valerie Perrine, the Las Vegas showgirl turned Oscar-nominated actor, best known for playing Lenny Bruce's wayward wife, Honey Harlow, in Lenny, and Lex Luthor's secretary, Eve Teschmacher, in the 1978 and 1980 Superman films, died Monday morning. She was 82.
And now, let us see what our horoscopes are by the stars today. Happy birthday for Thursday, March 26th. You are easygoing and quick thinking. People admire your straightforward and clear-sighted practicality. Lucky you. Prepare for a playful, fun-loving year. Enjoy socializing with others. And remember, each day is giving a star. If you're going to have 5 stars, you're going to have a dynamic day, 4 a positive, 3 an average, 2 so-so, and 1 difficult. And I stand by, I have never seen a 1. So nobody's ever had a difficult day. All right, Aries is a 4-star day. You can make excellent home improvements today because you're enthusiastic and people are willing to get on board with your plans. Tonight, relax. Taurus, another 4-star day. Today you feel warm-hearted and kind to others. In fact, you may sense that whatever you give today is exactly what you will receive back in return. Tonight, an explanation. Gemini, 4 stars. Look for ways to boost your income today because this is possible. You have big ideas and ambitious plans. Tonight, check your belongings. Cancer, another 4-star day. Today, the moon is in your sign, lined up with lucky Jupiter, which amplifies your success when dealing with members of the general public or working with large groups of people. Tonight, you're strong. Leo, a 3-star day. Travel and a chance to do something different beckons, or some of you might be attracted to someone unusual or different. Tonight, enjoy solitude. Virgo, a 4-star day. This is a popular day for you. Accept the responsibility that might be thrust on you by groups and organizations. Tonight, be friendly. Libra, a 3-star day. You make a great impression on everyone today because they see you as positive, energetic, and generous. This is why others will follow your lead. Tonight, you're noticed. Scorpio, a 4-star day. If you can travel today, this will thrill you. If you can't travel, perhaps you can make travel plans, or you can travel through film, conversation with someone, and study. Tonight, learn something. Sagittarius, a 3-star day. It looks like you have the practical and financial support to make improvements at home today. Tonight, check your finances. Capricorn, a 4-star day. This is an excellent day to reach out to others or work in conjunction with spouses, partners, and close friends. Tonight, listen to others. Aquarius, a 3-star day. Work-related travel is likely for many of you today. This is also a solid day to discuss money, earnings, and cash flow. Tonight, work. And Pisces, a 4-star day. This is a fun-loving, playful day. Accept invitations to schmooze and party, as well as enjoy sports events and fun activities with kids. Tonight, schmooze.
And from the Political Notebook, from the District of Columbia, a poll. Most think Iran effort has gone too far. Most Americans believe recent U.S. military action against Iran has gone too far, and many are worried about affording gasoline, according to a new AP NORC poll. As the war launched by the U.S. and Israel continues in its fourth week, the survey from the Associated Press NORC Center for Public Affairs Research indicates that while President Trump's approval rating is holding steady, the conflict could be swiftly turning into a major political liability for his Republican administration. While Trump is deploying more warships and troops to the Middle East, about 59% of Americans say U.S. military action in Iran has been excessive. Meanwhile, 45% are extremely or very concerned about being able to afford gas in the next few months, up from 30% in a poll conducted shortly after Trump won re-election, with promises that he would improve the economy and lower the cost of living. There is significant support for at least one of the president's objectives, which is preventing Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon. About two-thirds of Americans say that should be an extremely or very important foreign policy goal for the U.S. However, they are just as likely to say it's important to keep U.S. oil and gas prices from rising, a juxtaposition that could be difficult for the White House to manage. About 4 in 10 U.S. adults continue to approve of Trump's performance as president, which is unchanged from last month. His approval on foreign policy, while slightly lower than his overall approval, also largely held steady. And from Florida, Democrat flips seat in Trump's home district. Florida Democrats, beaten down by years of Republican domination in what was once the consummate battleground state, claimed new optimism Wednesday after a special election victory in President Trump's home district. Emily Gregory, a 40-year-old political newcomer who owns a fitness company, will represent the district that includes Mar-a-Lago, the president's resort in Palm Beach, as a state representative. Gregory's victory is the latest flip of a Republican-held seat since Trump's second presidency began, giving Democrats fresh confidence in a midterm election year with control of Congress and many state houses, including Florida's, up for grabs in November. For Gregory, it has been a stunning introduction into the national spotlight. Gregory told the AP she did not make her contest about the president specifically, but focused heavily on constituents' concerns involving the economy and everyday costs, from fast-rising insurance in the hurricane-prone district to groceries and gas. Trump endorsed Gregory's opponent, John Maples, and cast a mail ballot in the contest. The president reiterated his support for Maples on the eve of the election with a social media post saying the Republican candidate was backed by so many of my Palm Beach County friends. As of midday on Wednesday, Trump had not mentioned the outcome of the race. He also talks about not thinking mail write-in ballots are appropriate, yet he used one, which is also interesting. You're listening to a reading of articles from the Buffalo News for Thursday, March 26th on your Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. We'll return for more readings after this short break. Your readers today are
Pat Lamont
and Ruth Nowotniak.
If you're listening to this publication online, you're probably using our website, a podcast player like Spotify or iTunes, a streaming service like Siro, or a smart speaker. Did you know that we now have a dedicated app that can be downloaded to any mobile device, like a smartphone or tablet, for free? App users can conveniently access our live stream and any episode of our podcast easier than ever. To download the app, just type NFRRS in the search window in the Apple App Store or in the Google Play Store. Contact us anytime if you have any questions by calling 716-821-5555, extension 5. Thank you.
We'll continue now with our reading of articles and features from today's Buffalo News. Your readers are
Ruth Nowotniak.
and Pat Lamont, and let's see what's happening locally. Kaleida plan to reduce rehab beds at Buffalo General is delayed. Kaleida's health plan to reduce medical rehabilitation beds at Buffalo General Medical Center has been delayed for now. For the next 6 months, Buffalo General's medical rehabilitation unit will remain unchanged while an outside company conducts a community needs assessment to determine whether Kaleida can proceed with the plan to reduce beds in the unit from 34 to 16. According to the Communication Workers of America Local 1168, the union that represents workers in that unit. Union officials said the delay is a win for its members who had criticized the decision when it was first announced. This victory was secured through our collective action, the dozens of letters sent to the Department of Health in Kaleida, the massive turnout for public meeting, powerful testimony, and unwavering support from elected officials, the union posted on its website Tuesday. In a statement Wednesday, Kaleida spokesperson Jacqueline Bett said the health system still plans to reduce the medical rehabilitation unit bed count, but will take longer to do so based on additional regulatory requirements. Because the bed count is being changed by more than 10%, Bett said Kaleida is required to submit its certificate of need application to the state as an administrative review, which will increase the time it takes for the health department to review the submission. In addition, Kaleida must perform a health equity impact assessment, which takes several months and must be completed by a contracted consultant. We cannot reduce the bed count until DOH approves, but there is no firm date or timeline on that approval, she said. In a statement late Wednesday, the health department confirmed Buffalo General will need to submit a closure plan along with a certificate of need and required health equity impact assessment if there is a reduction in medical rehabilitation beds. To date, the health department said it has not received those submissions from Buffalo General. Kaleida's plan to reduce beds in the medical rehabilitation unit, which serves patients who are considered medically complex and require intensive rehabilitation, was quickly criticized in the community, most notably at a crowded public hearing last month in Buffalo General's Swift Auditorium. Most who spoke at the meeting were Buffalo General employees, union members, patients, or loved ones of people who have benefited from the rehabilitation unit services. Many of those who spoke urged Buffalo General's operator, Kaleida Health, to reevaluate its decision and find other ways to trim costs. The planned elimination of 18 beds in the unit would result in the layoff of 22 positions, though the affected workers would be placed in other vacant jobs. Buffalo General saved my mother's life, and the medical rehab unit at Buffalo General saved my mother's quality of life. Mallory Andrzejak, a nurse practitioner at the neighboring Roswell Park Comprehensive Cancer Center, said at the public hearing. Her mother had suffered a stroke in September and spent months at Buffalo General's medical rehabilitation unit. The planned reduction in medical rehabilitation beds was the least measure undertaken by Kaleida, as it accelerated a $200 million system-wide improvement plan as a response to the federal One Big Beautiful Act bill, which will reduce Medicaid spending nationwide. In previous statements, Kaleida said reducing the medical rehabilitation unit's bed count from 34 to 16 would be more in line with what the average census has been and is forecasted to be in the future. Kaleida has said the 18 beds slated to be eliminated from the medical rehabilitation unit would be repurposed to much needed inpatient capacity. In addition, Kaleida said patients requiring that level of care beyond the 16 remaining beds at Buffalo General would be able to access services at the other 2 medical rehabilitation units in the area. At Erie County Medical Center and at Kenmore Mercy Hospital, Catholic health officials have said the Kenmore Mercy Hospital recently renovated and expanded its medical rehabilitation unit to 30 beds and all new equipment. According to Kaleida's website, the medical rehabilitation unit provides around-the-clock rehabilitative nursing, and patients participate in intensive rehabilitation therapy up to 3 hours each day, 6 days a week. Medical rehabilitation units operate under the direction of a physiatrist, a physician specializing in rehabilitation care. The unit, which was fully renovated less than 3 years ago, has touched the lives of many Western New Yorkers who have suffered from strokes, traumatic brain injuries, spinal cord injuries, brain and spinal tumors, neurological disorders, and cardiac cases.
Williamsville Board delays vote on Music on Main noise limits. This is written by Stephen Watson, who's a news staff reporter. The Williamsville Village Board is waiting until next month to decide whether to change when amplified outdoor music is allowed in the community. Trustees did not vote on the update to Williamsville's noise ordinance at Monday evening's Village Board meeting, which drew a standing room only crowd of residents and business owners. The proposal came together after some residents complained about the volume of noise generated by Williamsville's weekly Music on Main performances and other live music at bars and restaurants along Main Street in the village. They said the noise at times can make it unpleasant to be outside, even inside their homes on summer evenings, and some businesses don't follow the rules as written now. It's not working. That's why we're here tonight, village resident Cheryl Myers said. But supporters of the concerts outnumbered critics Monday. Several speakers said the concerts are part of what makes Williamsville a desirable community. The noise is not an issue. We have young grandchildren that would have no problem sleeping in our house during Music on Main, said Bob Duke, who lives with his wife Andrea on Mill Street behind Sorrentino's Spaghetti House, one of the regular concert hosts. Many pressed the board not to impose undue restrictions on Williamsville's bars and restaurants. It's hard to make a living here. Look at the economy right now. We're struggling, and anything that hampers these businesses and their ability to make money is going to have an effect on this community, said James Now, a village resident and managing partner at Rationales, a Williamsville tavern. Posts had circulated on social media in the hours prior to Monday's meeting, urging supporters of the Music on Main concerts to attend that evening's public hearing on the local law. Some of the posts erroneously claimed the village was considering ending the Music on Main concerts. That wasn't true, and Mayor Christine Hunt expressed frustration at this spread of misinformation. The Williamsville Business Association and I have been working collectively on Music on Main for the past 2 years. We all have a vetted interest in its success. This is not about Music on Main, Hunt said Monday. This is about the nights the permits will be issued for amplified sound. Now, however, questioned why the village didn't do more to publicize accurate information about the hearing. The village published a legal notice in the Amherst Bee, the village's official paper of record, but did not announce the hearing on its website or Facebook page. The updated ordinance would ban amplified sound in the village from 4 p.m. Sunday through 4 p.m. Thursday. The updated rule would preserve the Music on Main concerts, which run Thursday evening during the summer and allows bars and restaurants to host bands on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday afternoon. Some speakers argued even this proposal goes too far and sought, for example, longer hours of amplified music on Sundays. Music and outdoor events is who we are and what we represent and why people come, Julie Flanagan, a village resident, said. Don't overregulate this any more than it needs to be. Please reconsider. Others pushed for further restrictions, including adding maximum decibel levels to the village code, something Hunt has described as difficult to enforce. Music still happens. Restaurants still have it. Get their money, get the people. It's awesome. But we lower the level. That's what it's about, said Cheryl Chrysler, a Williamsville resident. She had collected dozens of signatures on a petition seeking restrictions on noise levels. That, she said, can be uncomfortable for residents with sensory issues, headaches, and autism, or families with infants. Dan Delano, a former Williamsville mayor and trustee, said no other area community hosts what is essentially a weekly music festival in such a densely populated space. No one should expect a zero backlash, Delano said. He added complaints about music on Main came up cyclically, and he hopes the proposed ordinance change addresses them in a meaningful way. Village officials described the update as a compromise. I anticipate that the businesses will follow the expectation of reasonable noise levels. If anybody's concerned about those, and that residents and visitors to the village will be respectful of each other and of public and private property, Hunt said Monday. We have a really vibrant village here, and those are all important parts of keeping it that way and keeping it as an entertainment hub for our very short summer. Trustee Stephen Myers said he expects the village board to vote on the rule on April 27th, and he urged anyone with more to say on the issue to reach out to village officials between now and then. Mayer said he hasn't decided how he will vote. I think there's pretty broad agreement among citizens, among the business community, among government, that there is a need to address legitimate noise concerns and other concerns that come out of commercial activity, Meyer said in an interview. Where I have reservations is whether this particular proposal is the right way of doing that.
High schoolers invited to enter annual art event. Western New York high school students are invited to enter the annual Congressional Art Competition, a nationwide contest that celebrates the importance of arts and art education in schools. The theme is Western New York, a place for all of us. The artwork should capture the artist's appreciation for the people who make Western New York a great place to live. The grand prize winning piece will be displayed in the U.S. Capitol building. The winning student and guest will receive complimentary tickets from Southwest Airlines to attend a ribbon cutting in Washington at the end of June. Original artwork must be submitted before 5 p.m. on April 24th. Art pieces can be delivered to Senator Kennedy's Buffalo District Office at 726 Exchange Street, Suite 601. Each submission must also be accompanied by a completed release form. Artwork must be framed and should be no larger than 26 inches high and wide, 4 inches deep, and a weight of a maximum of 15 pounds. Accepted artwork includes paintings, drawings, collages, prints, mixed media using more than 2 mediums such as pencil, ink, watercolor, photographs, and computer-generated art, although artificial intelligence art is not permitted. If you need any more information, please call 716-852-3501 or for help filling an electronic form.
Canal Fest head wants justice, not jail for ex-treasurer, and this is by Stephen Watson, news staff reporter. The president of Canal Fest of the Tonawanda said he doesn't want to see the organization's former treasurer serve time behind bars for stealing nearly $27,000 from the nonprofit. Peter Chenier Sr. spoke to the Buffalo News 2 days after Kerry Hayne pleaded guilty to fourth-degree grand larceny, a felony, in front of the state Supreme Court Justice Mario Giacobbe. Cheney said he wants to see Hayne held accountable for her crimes, but he doesn't believe serving jail or prison time would be in anyone's interests. Hayne, 45, of Sanborn, initially was charged in September by North Tonawanda Police with third-degree grand larceny. Chenier said Wednesday that he made the initial discovery that about $7,000 was missing from the nonprofit's Key Bank account, and he brought it to the attention of the Canal Fest board. He said he and Canal Fest Vice President Rick Mayer confronted Hain, and he later reported the matter to the North Tonawanda Police. He said his son, Peter Jr., Hain's replacement as treasurer, worked with bank records to determine the total loss of $26,800 between 2023 and 2024. That's the amount Hain had agreed to repay through her plea deal, according to the Niagara County District Attorney's Office. She already has made partial repayment of $9,000. Hain's husband, Wally, had served on Canal Fest board, but he stepped down after her arrest. Hain faces up to 1 1/3 to 4 years in prison when she is sentenced May 21st, but she also could receive probation or a conditional discharge. Cheney said he doesn't plan on speaking at her sentencing.
You are listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. And now let us move on to sports. Sam Carrick brought a bonus when he joined the Sabres. He's suddenly become a goal scorer. Sam Carrick has quietly, efficiently, and proficiently done his job over the course of 10 NHL seasons. In just 9 games with the Buffalo Sabres, he has suddenly created an offensive outburst. The Sabres acquired Carrick from the New York Rangers on March 6 for a 3rd-round pick and 6th-round pick in this year's NHL draft, and the 34-year-old from Markham, Ontario, centered the 4th line in his first 9 games with the team. The Sabres acquired Carrick for his ability to be chippy, defensive-minded, and to bring a versatile presence on faceoffs. The bonus in the deal, Carrick has scored 5 goals with an assist since he joined the Sabres, including 2 goals in a 5-0 win March 19th in San Jose. Carrick and the Sabres were set to host the Boston Bruins on Wednesday night at KeyBank Center, the first game of a 4-game homestand that continues at 7 p.m. Friday against Detroit. Carrick needs 2 goals to match his career high of 11 set in 2021-22 with Anaheim, and he's helping the Sabres close in on the franchise's first playoff berth since 2011. "You expect to contribute in any way you can," he said, who has 9 goals with 7 assists and is a +2 with 99 hits in 69 games this season with the Rangers and Sabres. "You look at my numbers, and I haven't been scoring as much this year, but I think it just goes hand in hand with the great opportunity that they've given me here on the 4th line. I think we do a great job of just rolling our lines and making sure everyone's feeling good, feeling in the groove throughout the game, and it helps us as players when you're being put in different situations to succeed and help the team." Situational success has been the key both for Carrick and the Sabres' 4th line. The 4th line hockey is often the trio that kills penalties, follows through on hits, and is tasked with shutting down an opponent's top lines and top players. Carrick brings another dimension to a line that already has a certain mix of skills. Carrick is a face-off specialist and a defensive forward, and right-wing back Malliston brings a physical presence as evidenced by his 244 hits, which was 7th in the NHL as of Tuesday. Tanner Pearson, Peyton Krebs, Tyson Kozak, and Zach Benson have rotated on the left wing in those 9 games. Our 4th line has probably been one of our best lines every night, giving us energy and giving us life. Obviously some big goals, Sabres forward Tage Thompson said. Carrick brings experience both to the 4th line and to the Sabres dressing room. He played in the Stanley Cup playoffs in 23-24 with the Edmonton Oilers. He has also played parts of his career in the American Hockey League and the East Coast Hockey League. He's been around for a while, and he's played a few different teams and seen what other teams have and what success they've had, Thompson said. Anytime you play as long as he has, there's a certain level of experience and wisdom that comes with it. He's been able to bring that into our room, and it's been good for the situation we're in right now. Going for the playoffs, having someone who's been around and been in that situation. Carrick's acquisition was a strategic one by Sabres general manager Jarmo Kekalainen. The Sabres boosted their depth at center, improved their proficiency on faceoffs, especially with Carrick, a right-handed shot, having the ability to take faceoffs at even strength or on special teams. Carrick is at 57.1% on faceoffs since joining the team March 6th. The Sabres entered Wednesday at 46.5% on faceoff percentage, up from 45% since acquiring Carrick. The Sabres had been at or above 50% on faceoffs in only 13 of the first 62 games, according to the News Game charting. They are at or above 50% in 5 of their last 9 games ahead of Wednesday. What has allowed Carrick to flourish on a team that continues to flourish after an 11-14-4 start to the season, combined with some key acquisitions at the trade deadline, a combination of veteran savvy and upbeat personality, a tireless work ethic, and consistency. He is just playing his game, said center Ryan McLeod, who was a teammate of Carrick's in Edmonton in 2023-24. He's a player that coming in here, he knew he could help the team, and it was not trying to do too much. He's doing his thing, and it's working for us.
Sizing up remaining free agents for the Bills. This article is written by Jay Skursky, who's a news sports reporter. Free agency has hit a bit of a lull in the NFL. After the initial frenzy earlier this month and a traditional second wave, teams and unsigned players have fallen into something of a holding pattern. There are a couple of reasons for that. Number one, front offices are busy finalizing their 2026 draft boards. Teams may want to see what's available in the draft before they turn back to free agency to fill remaining holes on their rosters. And number two, teams in line to receive a 2027 compensatory draft pick or draft picks likely don't want to mess with that formula at this point in the offseason. That could be a factor for the Buffalo Bills, who lost left guard David Edwards to a lucrative free agent deal with the New Orleans Saints. It's not yet clear whether that will net the Bills a 2027 pick, but it will certainly be a consideration for President of Football Operations and General Manager Brandon Beane. While free agency might have slowed to a crawl, it's not over. Some players still on the open market could help the Bills in 2026, and their roster still has holes. With that in mind, here are 10 free agents in no particular order who might still make sense. Defensive tackle, DJ Reader. He's no longer in his prime, but the 31-year-old remains a solid rotational piece along the defensive line. At 6'3" and 335 pounds, Reader would give the Bills a big body to help in run defense while also still having some juice as a pass rusher. Wide receiver, Juwan Jennings. The Bills love wide receivers who can block, and Jennings is the best blocker in this year's class of free agents. Cost is likely a factor here. Jennings is projected to receive a 3-year contract worth up to $42 million, according to analytics website Pro Football Focus. And he comes in at that price. He'll cost the Bills their possible compensatory pick. The cutoff date when signings no longer count in the compensatory formula comes right after the draft, so that would mean Jennings stays without a team for another month. A move like this feels unlikely, but if it were the case, he'd be an excellent fit for what the Bills want out of their wide receivers. Edge, Jadeveon Clowney. An all-time NFL vagabond, Clowney has played for 6 teams in the past 7 seasons. He had a 19% pressure rate in 25, which ranked 4th among all defensive players with at least 200 pass rush snaps. He's also a solid run defender, and his history shows would be fine with a short-term contract. Guard, Joe Bitonio. A 12-year veteran, Bitonio allowed just 2 sacks in nearly 700 pass-blocking snaps for the Browns in 25, according to PFF. He would provide a solid replacement for Edwards at left guard, allowing the Bills to use Alec Anderson as their number 6 offensive lineman, backing up all 5 spots. Cornerback, Rasul Douglas. A year ago, it was obvious Douglas's time with the Bills was done. However, a lot has changed since then. He had a solid year with the Dolphins, and perhaps more importantly, the Bills have changed their defensive coaching staff. That could open the door for a reunion because the team has a glaring need for a number 3 cornerback on the outside behind Maxwell Harrison and Tre'Davious White. Edge, Leonard Floyd. In sticking with the reunion candidates, Floyd had a pressure rate of 13% on his pass rushing opportunities in 25, which still ranked among the top 50 defenders who played at least 200 such snaps. His lone season in Buffalo in 23 was productive, and the Bills are still searching for players who can get after the opposing quarterback. Defensive tackle Calais Campbell. Retirement is an option, but Campbell hasn't closed the door on a possible 19th NFL season. The Bills have had interest in him in the past. There has been some talk he's not interested in coming to a cold weather city, but there would be no harm in being at least reaching out. Campbell, 39, can still contribute to a defensive line rotation with his power and quick hands. Linebacker Bobby Wagner. Like Campbell, Wagner is an NFL senior citizen entering his age 36 season. Wagner, however, continues to play at a high level. He was the only linebacker to earn 90-plus PFF grades in run defense, and at 93, pass rushing at 92, and tackling at 90 last season, extending a run of 4 straight years with a 90-plus run defense grade. He's also an excellent leader and locker room presence. Given the Bills' struggles to stop the run, Wagner should absolutely get some consideration. Defensive linebacker Danico Autry. Like Wagner, Autry is also entering his age 36 season. He remains a disruptive interior pass rusher, having played most of his snaps for Houston last season on 3rd down. The Bills will likely want to use Ed Oliver for that role, so the fit might not be perfect in Buffalo, but Autry would provide some nice depth behind Oliver. And last, wide receiver Keenan Allen. This one depends on the future of Keon Coleman. The Bills keep saying publicly that Coleman is part of their plans for 26, but that could just be posturing in the hopes of getting an attractive trade offer. If Coleman were sent out, the possibility of signing Allen would be more attractive. The veteran receiver will be 34 next season, but he still caught 29 passes on 3rd down last season that moved the chains, which led the NFL. That's something any offense could use. Allen might not have a lot of interest in coming all the way across the country from the Chargers to the Bills, but Josh Allen's presence can go a long way in attractive free agents to Buffalo.
Embarrassed umps, and that's their concern. Richie Garcia is worried about the impact robot umpires will have on their human counterparts. Major League Baseball introduced the automated ball strike system for regular season play this season, giving teams a chance to appeal strike zone decisions to a system based on 12 Hawkeye cameras. I think it's embarrassing to the umpires that are calling the game. Nobody likes to be humiliated in front of 30 to 40,000 people, said Garcia, a major league umpire from 1975 to 1999. What Major League Baseball is saying is, I don't trust the umpire's strike zone, so I'm going to use something that's going to be operated by some computer geek that knows nothing about baseball, and he's the one that's going to measure this and measure that because he's got a PhD in physics or whatever the hell he's got a degree in. Garcia drew criticism for not calling a strike on a 2-2 pitch, from San Diego's Mark Langston to the Yankees' Tino Martinez in the 1998 World Series opener, and Martinez hit a tie-breaking grand slam for the next offering that sparked New York to a 4-game sweep. That's going to be very interesting, I think. And Bison's name starter for opener. Grant Rogers, a 6'7" right-hander who combined to win 11 games last season at 2 levels of the Toronto Blue Jays chain, has been named the opening day starter for the Buffalo Bisons when they host the Scranton Wilkes-Barre Rail Riders at 1:05 p.m. Friday in Salem Field. Rogers, 24, split his 11 wins last year between Class A Vancouver and Double A New Hampshire. He had 115 strikeouts and only 38 walks in 150 1/3 innings. Friday's game will be his Triple A debut. Well, good boys. Good luck. The teams seem to be doing pretty well this year.
I think so.
Let's keep that roll. You are listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on the Niagara Frontier Radio's reading service. The time is 30 minutes after the hour. And let's see what kind of advice Eric Thomas is giving today. Dear Eric, I have a wonderful spiritual family friend who I have known for more than 20 years. I value her friendship, but she has always been very materialistic and continuously lives through her children and their successes. I am always supporting her and love her and her family, but there are times when she strikes a nerve with me because of how much she tends to brag about how her adult children have treated her to family trips and such. I am blessed and humbled to have a successful family as well, but would never stoop to this behavior. She is a good and loving family friend, and as much as she makes me bite my tongue, I am grateful for her friendship. Any advice on how I may gently hint my dislike of this green-eyed monster behavior? Tired of bragging. His answer. Dear Tired, I'm of two minds about this. A generous, perhaps overly generous interpretation of this dilemma suggests that your friend is proud of her family, and what comes across as bragging might simply be her way of sharing the things that are important in her life. It may not be the way you would choose, but that doesn't make it malicious per se. Now, on the other hand, if you write that she's always been materialistic, it might also be true that she focuses too much on material things. But I caution against chastising her for not aligning with your values. She may not see herself as materialistic. There's not an objective scale. What can you do, however, is tell her, as a friend, that some conversational subjects are challenging to you and that you'd prefer to talk about other things. You can be specific and keep it focused on what you need. In this way, you're making strides toward better communication rather than passing judgment on her. It will deepen your friendship while also helping you stay out of the path of the green-eyed monster. Next, dear Eric, I have several close and fulfilling relationships with family and friends. Twice now I have had what I thought fit this category, only to have the person drift away for no clear reason. One relationship was a friend with whom I was close with for many years. They suddenly stopped responding to communication. After several years, we briefly got back in touch. They seemed happy to hear from me, filled me in on things that happened in their life, and now we are in contact sporadically, unusually with me sending a random meme. The topic of them cutting off contact has never been broached. The second was with a family member with whom I was close when we were younger. We are mostly in contact through social media and occasionally when visiting family. But they seemed disinterested in seeing me. At one point, a few years ago, I was in their area of the country, and despite several attempts to make plans, they made excuses to avoid meeting up. I understand sometimes people find it easier to do this than to confront issues in a relationship. My question is, should I bother asking what happened or just leave the relationships where they are? And it's signed, Loss of Contact. His response: if the change in these two relationships is bothering you, and if you have a desire to fix it if possible, then asking makes sense. Relationships shift all the time, and sometimes people don't have the skills or desire to handle that shift with clear communication. This can lead to confusion or weird gray area in which you find yourself now. It's not too late to clear the air, even if that clarity is just confirmation that the relationships are more casual and distant now. Before you reach out, ask yourself what you're trying to accomplish, what you want to know, and what outcomes you're hoping for. This will help you have a more productive conversation, which you can offer suggestions for things that can change or ways you'd like to connect more meaningfully. And finally, dear addict, what is the proper protocol for baby gifting? If you are invited to a reveal party, a baby shower, and then you go to visit the baby at home, when do you bring a gift? Is it necessary to buy 3? Confused. Dear confused. This is going to vary person to person and cultural context to cultural context. But as baby celebrations have expanded, it's generally been accepted that if you're attending a shower, that's a great time to bring a gift. This helps the parent plan in advance of the baby's arrival and might have a more comprehensive registry. Gifts aren't generally expected at reveal parties. Ultimately, it's up to you. But you won't be thought rude if you only bring one gift.
Our first life feature, Wilson Conservancy leaders quit ahead of park's opening. This is by Jonathan Epstein, who's a news staff reporter. The top leadership of the Ralph Wilson Park Conservancy resigned in the last few weeks, leaving the nonprofit with no staff and only an acting chairman just months before the $250 million public park is slated to begin reopening on Buffalo's Lower West Side. Executive Director Katie Campos, Board Chairman John R. Colmel, and Carrie Root Bonaro, Director of Administration and Engagement, all quit between late January and the end of February. They declined to discuss the reasons for their departure. The agency has no other employees and only 8 other members on its board, which is now led by acting chairman Charles Torres, who is regional director for Hispanics United of Buffalo. It's not clear what impact this will have on the opening of the city-owned park, which has tripled in size from its original plan and has been hit with a 5-fold increase in costs. The Conservancy remains fully focused on supporting this world-class destination park that Buffalo deserves, and on partnering with the city to operate, maintain, and program the park once it is completed, Torres said in an emailed statement. We are proud of the significant progress made to date and its many features designed to strengthen connections with the surrounding community. The Conservancy is a nonprofit organization formed in January 2021 to manage and operate the city-owned park, which is being redeveloped with significant investment from both the public sector and the Detroit-based Ralph C. Wilson Jr. Foundation. The park was designed by a renowned landscape architect, Michael Van Valkenburg and Associates, with Gilbane Building Company as the construction manager. However, the Conservancy is not responsible for the design of the park or its construction, both of which are directed by the Wilson Foundation and the city through the Buffalo Urban Development Corporation. Instead, the Conservancy's duties include maintenance, security, and ongoing programming for the park, which initially was expected to open in 2024, but is now slated for no sooner than this summer and possibly not until 2027. The park project was unveiled in 2018, although construction work did not begin until July of 2023. Originally envisioned as a $50 million project for 35 acres of athletic fields, it has ballooned to 5 times the cost and more than 100 acres as the project became more ambitious in scope to encompass the rest of the park and the new signature pedestrian bridge that runs over the I-190. That's due to higher construction expenses and cost overruns, as well as extensive infrastructure work along the shoreline that was not anticipated a decade ago. Those costs, as well as an initial operating endowment, are borne by the city and the foundation, which was created from the proceeds of the $1.4 billion sale of the Buffalo Bills from Wilson to Terry Pagula in 2014. While the recent resignations create some uncertainty in the near term, what doesn't change is how important Ralph Wilson Park is to the future of Buffalo, said Mayor Sean Ryan. This is a once-in-a-generation investment in our waterfront, and it's critical that it's well-managed, well-maintained, and set up for long-term success. We'll be working closely with remaining board members and stakeholders to make sure there's a clear path forward and that the park has the support it needs to reach its full potential. Campos was the organization's founding head since October 22, after working in politics and community advocacy. She left February 27th, with the board accepting her resignation effective immediately. She declined to comment, but in an email and statement sent to colleagues, Campos said she was incredibly proud of what we built together and the foundation now in place for the park's future. She cited new relationships with neighbors and partner organizations and the engagement of thousands of folks through activities, community meetings, and celebrating park milestones like the pedestrian bridge. She also said she had created a blueprint for the park that positions the Conservancy for success, while cultivating a national network of park leaders and practitioners to advise her and set the foundation for the nonprofit to be sustainable, with the governance, systems, and partnerships needed to lead the park through opening day and beyond. And she said their effort had reignited a belief in Buffalo that we deserve world-class public spaces, and we can work together to make them come to life. Ralph Wilson Park will be a generational asset for Buffalo, and it has been an honor to help bring it to life, she wrote. I can't wait to hang out at Ralph Wilson Park with my family as often as possible. Colmel, a veteran banker and former CEO of First National Financial Group, who was also chairman of the New York Power Authority, joined the board in June 24 and was elected chairman in October 25 to succeed the retiring Keith Bellinger. He resigned at the end of January following a board meeting. I signed up to be part of a solution to help lead the board and organization and effect a successful opening of the park, he said. It became clear to me that my ability to do that was more limited than I anticipated, and I didn't want to compromise in any way, shape, or form the intended objective. He would not elaborate. Bonaro joined the organization from the Buffalo Medical Campus, Niagara Medical Campus, where she had been Director of Communications and Government Affairs. She started talking to Campos last summer about leaving and tendered her resignation in early January, but Campos asked her to stay on for a few more weeks. She left the same day as Campos, although she has stayed on in a part-time consulting role at the board's request.
Bird rule could confound effort to use reconciliation for SAVE Act. Republicans have started talking seriously about using the filibuster-proof budget reconciliation process to get the GOP voter ID bill, a top priority of President Trump, through the narrowly divided Senate. But budget experts say the effort faces long odds due to the complexities of the Senate's Byrd rule. The House-passed bill is fundamentally a policy measure that would require, among other things, that individuals provide proof of citizenship when registering to vote in federal elections and present photo identification when casting a ballot in a federal election. The challenge for including the so-called Safeguard American Voter Eligibility Act, or SAVE America Act, in reconciliation legislation is that under Senate rules, reconciliation provisions would need to have a budgetary impact that cannot be merely incidental to the larger purpose of the measure. The Byrd Rule, adopted in the mid-1980s and later codified in statute, bars provisions from reconciliation legislation that are extraneous to bringing spending and taxes in line with congressional budget resolution. Any section of a reconciliation bill deemed out of compliance with the Byrd Rule is left exposed to a 60-vote point of order, effectively stripping that provision of its protection from filibuster. Provisions struck on a Byrd Rule point of order fall out of a reconciliation bill, which can greatly affect its chance of passage, depending on the political importance of the offending language. Such hurdles have not prevented GOP lawmakers from exploring the possibility. Senator John Hoeven said Tuesday that because Congress provides funding for elections, voter ID provisions could be written in a way that show a budgetary effect. So if you just put your mind to it, there's plenty of ways I think that we can go to work and include Save America provisions through the budgetary process in terms of the federal government and providing funding to states, he said. Senate Republicans have also been reviewing proposed voting initiatives that the House Administration Committee, which has jurisdiction over election legislation, believes might be allowed in reconciliation. These include SAVE Act provisions that would appropriate funds to states to require proof of citizenship in order to register to vote, and the U.S. Election Assistance Commission to amend federal voter registration form to require documentary proof of citizenship. Another proposal from the committee would deny grants from a 2002 election law to states that allowed the use of non-compliant identification required to vote. The House committee proposals would also award grants to states to work with federal agencies to verify voter registration and conduct post-election audits. Douglas Holtz Aiken, president of the Center-Right American Action Forum and former Congressional Budget Office director, is skeptical that major provisions of the bill would pass muster with the Senate parliamentarian. A straightforward reading of it is not budgetary in nature, he said. Changing mail-in voting rules, a provision that is not in the SAVE bill that Trump wants passed as well, is not a federal budget item. Nothing in the current versions I've seen of SAVE would pass the Byrd Rule, a former Senate GOP aide said. They could probably provide money to states for voter fraud enforcement or creating enhancing voter ID requirements, but the number of strings put on the money would have to be pretty minimal to pass muster. Not all GOP senators think the idea will pass muster, including some of the election bill's most vocal backers. I don't see any way that any part of the Save America Act or any teeth gets included in a reconciliation package, Senator Rick Scott said Tuesday. Scott is also pessimistic about the chances of Republicans uniting to pass another reconciliation bill. Democrats are already lining up their talking points for an eventual Byrd bath, or the process whereby each party presents its arguments to the parliamentarian for why a provision should qualify under reconciliation. The meat of what they want is not doable under the rules of reconciliation, said Bobby Kogan, Senior Director of Federal Budget Policy at the left-leaning Center for American Progress. Reconciliation, he added, is about getting federal dollars in or out of the door, and telling a state how it must conduct its voting has nothing to do with federal dollars going in or out. Kogan, a former Senate Democratic budget aide, said every provision in the reconciliation bill needs to be directly budgetary or a term and condition necessary to carry out the budgetary effect, saying a state has to change how it is administering voting in quintessentially non-budgetary. Even when provisions in a reconciliation bill have a budgetary impact, the Senate parliamentarian Elizabeth McDonough may find that the budgetary effects are merely incidental, a violation of the Byrd Rule. For example, when Democrats sought to pass an immigration overhaul as part of the 2021 Pandemic Relief Reconciliation Law, the parliamentarian rejected the move, saying the budgetary impact of the measure was incidental to change it would make in policy. Changing the law to clear the way for immigrants to become permanent residents would be a tremendous and enduring policy change that dwarfs its budgetary impact, she wrote. One Senate Democratic aide said if Republicans try to pass the voter ID legislation through reconciliation, Democrats will argue that the same is true, if not more so, of the right to vote. Budget experts also point to the parliamentarians' rejection of raising the federal minimum wage to $15 an hour through reconciliation in 2021. While that provision would have affect the federal budget significantly, McDonough deemed that the impact merely incidental to the underlying policy intent of the wage boost. If McDonough rejects the GOP plan, supporters will still have a last resort opportunity, ignoring the parliamentarian's advice that a Byrd Rule point of order is well taken. A successful appeal of the chair's ruling would require 60 votes, a steep climb for Democrats in the GOP-controlled Senate. But many Republicans, from Senate Majority Leader John Thune of South Dakota on down through the rank and file, have said they won't take that radical step, which is akin to the nuclear option. Senator James Langford, a SAVE Act supporter, said Tuesday he would not support such a move.
How TSA agents are scraping by without paychecks. This is an Associated Press article. A woman in Indiana who put off dental surgery because she doesn't know if she can afford the copay. A Florida couple with young children who are depleting their savings. A grandmother in Ohio who plans to sell her car to pay the rent. They are among the tens of thousands Transportation Security Administration officers set to receive another $0 paycheck this week. A dispute in Congress over funding the Department of Homeland Security has held up their salaries since mid-February. With monthly bills coming due, many of these federal employees who screen passengers and luggage at airports across the U.S. are making difficult choices about how to make ends meet. High absentee rates at some major airports have produced long lines and frustrated passengers at understaffed security checkpoints. Union leaders and federal officials say empty gas tanks, child care expenses, and the threat of eviction keep more screeners from showing up the longer the shutdown continues. At last count, more than 455 had quit instead of weathering the ongoing uncertainty, according to DHS. Stop asking me about long lines. Ask me if somebody's going to eat today, Heydrich Thomas, president of the National American Federation of Government Employees Union Council that represents TSA employees, told reporters Tuesday. Before starting her shift at Indianapolis International Airport on Monday, Taylor Desert stopped at a food bank for meat, eggs, vegetables, and dairy products. I never thought I would be in a position where, working for the federal government, I would need to go to a food bank to supplement my groceries, she said as she loaded bags into her car. Desert, who had been a TSA officer for 7 years, said her last full paycheck came on February 14th, the day the shutdown started. She had some savings to draw on despite a record 43-day shutdown last fall, but put some personal plans on pause. For example, she needs to get her wisdom teeth removed, but said the TSA isn't approving time off during the shutdown. She also worries about costs from the surgery not covered by insurance. Wednesday was the 39th day of the DHS funding lapse. If it goes another 21 days, Desert said she would seek another job. Osaka Kelly, 38, and her husband, Darren, 37, both work as TSA agents at Orlando. They have 2 young children and don't know how they will keep supporting their family without any income coming in. Kelly said they're dipping into their savings, but it's running dry. If the shutdown persists, they will ask relatives to help or take out a loan, but she worries that would put them deeper into debt. Her husband has worked as a DoorDash delivery driver in his spare time since the shutdown. He's considered resigning from the TSA to put a couple on more stable financial footing. It's very mentally exhausting, she said. How do we even decide between being able to feed our kids or come to work? Kelly said strangers might criticize the couple for putting all eggs in one basket since both chose to work for TSA. All we want is to pay our bills and get the pay we deserve. The 53-year-old TSA officer and union leader in Boise, Idaho, joined the agency soon after its creation in the wake of September 11th. She was homeless at the time, but turned her situation around with steady work and the benefits of federal employment. Now she can't help but dwell on where she was 24 years ago. I don't want to be in that position again. Her February 28th paycheck amounted to $13.53, sending her into a spiral right away. With no savings to fall back on, she is preparing to sell her car to cover her rent due in a week. She calls nonprofits daily seeking rental assistance, but hasn't had any luck.
You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the Buffalo News for Thursday, March 26th. We read the Buffalo News live on weekday and Sunday mornings at 9 a.m. and rebroadcast at 4 p.m. For more information, please call us at 716-821-5555. Your readers today have been
Ruth Nowotniak
and Pat Lamont. Thank you for listening and have a wonderful day.
If you're listening to this publication online, you're probably using our website, a podcast player like Spotify or iTunes, a streaming service like Siro, or a smart speaker. Did you know that we now have a dedicated app that can be downloaded to any mobile device, like a smartphone or tablet, for free? App users can conveniently access our live stream and any episode of our podcast easier than ever. To download the app, just type NFRRS in the search window in the Apple App Store or in the Google Play Store. Contact us anytime if you have any questions by calling 716-821-5555, extension 5. Thank you. Radio Reading mails out a large print program schedule to our listeners every other month. If you have not received a Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service large print program schedule in the mail, please call us at 716-821-5555. We will make sure that you receive one every other month. A Braille version of the schedule is also available upon request. Our number again is 716-821-5555. intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or have another print disability,